let's just talk about me in particular first. So just for anybody that is curious or in doubt or anything like that, first of all, the details don't even make sense.
Hey guys, welcome back. Today we have Nick Fuentes. Not going to waste any time. If you enjoy this content, please consider liking and subscribing. It helps the channel. Let's get right into it.
The indictment says this person was paid from 2015 to 2023. In 2015, I was 16 years old. Okay. I turned 17. I was a junior in high school in 2015. Okay. And I wasn't even far right. In 2015, I was like a libertarian. I thought Trump was too far right. Okay, so that's for openers. They said this person between 15 and 23 was paid $250,000. Okay, well, me, I was in high school when that started. That's one. Two, as it pertains to Charlottesville, and I've told this story a million times, I didn't even actually go to Charlottesville. And you might say, well, what does that mean? It was a last minute decision. I did not organize Charlottesville. I didn't know any of the leaders at Charlottesville. At that time, I was 18. I was 18 when Charlottesville happened. I was a college dropout. I had no connections. And I made a last minute decision to go about 2 or 3 days before the rally. I wasn't even in the city for the Tiki Torch March. And by the time I landed the day of the actual protest, by the time I got to my hotel, the whole thing was already over. I literally just got there late. And I could show you receipts for that. I could show you proof. But I've told this story. It's been consistent for like 10 years. I showed up at my hotel at like 11 a.m. the Saturday of the rally. By that time, the police had already dispersed it. I got there late. Everybody was getting chased out of the park. I went with James Alsup, a handful of other people. We were there for like a half hour, then I went back to my hotel. So none of those details even make sense. One other thing, which is a little bit relevant, I have been at war with the SPLC for my entire career. And they have done horrible things to me. Not least of all, including they doxed my assistant, who went by the name of Jew Groiper. This was my only full-time employee. They doxed him. 2 of my interns that were working on Capitol Hill for Paul Gosar and Marjorie Taylor Greene, they doxed those people. The biggest one and the best one, though, is that in 2022, they are actually the group responsible for doxing my home address. You remember this? You might have heard about it. About a year and a half ago, I put out a tweet after the election. I said, your body, my choice. It went super viral. It got 100 million views. Because the tweet generated so much outrage, people found my address and hundreds of people, that's not an exaggeration, started showing up to my house, knocking on my door, throwing eggs at my house, doing all kinds of things, recording my house, honking their horn, whatever. And it led to someone trying to kill me. A young man, 23-year-old man, came to my door with a gun. After he killed 3 people already, he killed his best friend's mom and sister, and then he drove 3 hours to my house, to my front door, marched up to the front door with a gun, with the intention of killing me, okay? All of that happened because in 2022, when I actually moved into my new address, the SPLC doxed my house. They posted a picture of my house on their website and they linked to my address. They interviewed my neighbors and published about my whereabouts, when I come and go, what floor I live on.
Yeah, look, I remember when all this happened. And the interesting thing about this incident is that I'm surprised that Nick didn't sue them for it, right? A company that doxes your address, which results in somebody showing up to your house with a gun trying to kill you, and then a bunch of other people showing up to your house throwing eggs at the building and, honking their horn outside, disturbing the peace, right? I feel like that's a lawsuit in and of itself, but I know litigation in the US is kind of tricky. I don't know the exact pretext needed to pursue litigation, but it just seems interesting that he wasn't able to get a lawsuit going because of the harassment that he faced as a result of the SPLC doxing his address.
And I'll read you, this is from the article, you can Google it. The headline is, Nick Fuentes trades parents' basement for pricey live streaming den. Pricey live streaming den. It was a $390,000 3-flat in Berwyn, Illinois. Okay, pricey live streaming den. It's not, this is like a working class neighborhood. That's not that much money. It's a 3-flat apartment building. They say pricey live streaming den is crazy. You would have thought it's like some $1 million single family home in like Park Ridge or Hinsdale or Elmhurst. Pricey live streaming den is crazy. Yeah, he bought an apartment building in Pilsen, living like a real king, this guy. Anyway, so that's the headline, trades parents' basement. I think I was 22 when I moved out. I know that's totally insane to live with your parents when you're 22. Anyway, but this is the article. It says, quote, Hate Watch spoke to several of Fuentes' neighbors whose names are being withheld over concerns they may be harassed or targeted by Fuentes' followers. You're interviewing my neighbors. It says on the topic of Fuentes, most of the neighbors Hate Watch spoke with say the live streamer who pumps out vociferous white nationalist propaganda on his live streams appears meek in real life, keeping to himself, apparently entertaining few visitors, and does not call attention to himself. Several said that when he is at his home in Berwyn, his movements appear to be limited to passing from his garage to the back door of the apartment. Fuentes' building is located on a quiet tree-lined street, a short walk from one of Berwyn's main shopping districts. On the block where the white nationalist 2-story building is located, Hate Watch observed his neighbors doing weekend chores and children playing in yards and on sidewalks. From the property's exterior, Hate Watch observed the basement apartment and the first floor was empty. They're literally looking through my windows. On the second floor, the blinds were drawn. Hate Watch also observed a construction permit on the window of the first floor of the building. Neighbors confirmed Hate Watch's impression that the basement and first floor appear to be currently unoccupied, with Fuentes and his live streaming operation on the second floor. On another visit, a Hate Watch reporter knocked on the front door, but there was no answer. So look, like, I'm not one to complain. You know that about me. One thing you know about me is I don't complain. Like, I hate complaining. But how messed up is it? How messed up is this? This is insane. This is fucked up. And this is totally insane that a far left political group with $1 billion in cash is posting for everybody to know where a person lives.
Facts. Now imagine if something like this happened to Hassan Piker, for example. A far-right organization doxes his address. People show up to his house in the hundreds. They're throwing eggs at the building, following his mom around town. And then some crazy guy shows up to his house with a gun trying to execute him. People looking through his windows. How insane would that sound? Even for people on the right, when they hear that story, they're going to be like, this is weird. I don't know about that one. You know what I mean? Stalking him at his house? Like, come on, we're better than that. But apparently not for the far left. They're cool with that. They think it's okay because in their mind, anything necessary to destroy the far right.
With this much detail. This is insane. We looked through his windows. This floor is unoccupied. We think he lives in the second floor. We talked to his neighbors. We knocked on the front door. These are his habits. These are his whereabouts. This should be illegal. What is the purpose of this? It's not like they're reporting on my rhetoric or my show or my operation. They're literally telling everybody, this is where he lives. Get him. If you want to kill this guy, this is where he is. This is where you can find him. This is where you can physically hurt this person. That's all that is. And everybody knows that. That is like a soft form of homicide. Because that is what they're doing here. They're trying to incite people to kill me. They're saying, if you want to mess with this person, harass this person, intimidate, assault, this person, this is where you can find them. That's what it is. While simultaneously saying he's a vociferous white nationalist, but he's evil, his fans are insane. Okay? But then it gets better. If that's not bad enough. So this super rich organization is just doxing a civilian, doxing a citizen. That's not bad enough. They get what they want. Okay, the dox exists because of the SPLC. And when I get in controversy, people start showing up and yeah, someone tries to kill me and now a young man is dead. Not this young man, but the person that tried to kill me was killed by police. Now, fast forward a year and a half later, And people are seriously saying that I'm getting paid by this organization. People are saying, oh, you sold out to the SPLC. You took money. Oh, now I see why you support the Democrats. You're an SPLC informant. And no one will ever know and no one will ever care, because that is the nature of the information space. These pro-Trump influencers, they do not care about the truth. They have no integrity. They're all being paid. They have identified me as somebody that is contrary to Trump, contrary to the Republican Party. And so because I am the enemy, now they're just going to put that out there. They don't care that it's not true. Laura Loomer, all these other people putting this stuff out, this is just going to be another one of those things they say about me, just like the J6 thing. Oh, that SPLC. Oh, I heard he was with the SPLC, but it's just one of those things that through repetition they put out there, and nobody knows the SPLC is responsible for almost taking my life. I have to move because of them, because they almost killed me. And now I'm going to be tarred for the rest of my career with this insinuation that I'm also being paid by them. So even if somebody tries to kill you, they're still going to say you're being paid by them. Okay? And by the way, here's the other part that's even better. All these people that are saying that, they never got targeted by the SPLC. The SPLC is only one among many groups that are like this. There is the SPLC, there is the ADL, there is the Media Matters for America, there is Right Wing Watch, Project for American Way, Atlantic Council, Digital Forensics Lab. You have all these different outfits. You have all these different NGOs, excuse me, nonprofits, activist groups, and their job is to put the screws on the far right. Through whatever, it's like guerrilla warfare, paying informants, doxing you, going after your payments, going after your family, your associates, bringing the government down on you. They don't play fair. They don't play nice. This is what they do. And the rich irony in this is that the center-right people that are accusing me and others of being feds or informants for the SPLC, they never get targeted by the far left. Never get censored. All these people that are saying this, take like Chris Rufo and Lomez, for example. These are two guys that have a show on The Blaze. Lomez, his real name is Jonathan Keeperman. He's at Passage Press. Christopher Rufo's at Manhattan Institute. They have been putting that kind of stuff out there that the far right are all feds. They're with the SPLC, whatever. These are two center-right guys that have a job at The Blaze, have a job at the Paul Singer funded Manhattan Institute. They've never been censored in their lives. They never got banned on Twitter. They never got banned on YouTube, and they still aren't. They never got banned on PayPal. They never got banned on Stripe. No one ever tried to kill them. They never got doxxed. And this is the classic, because here, I'm trying to paint a picture here for you. This is the classic construction, which is that the center-right works with the far left against the far right every single time. The far left wages war on the far right, and the center right joins them hand in hand. So, for example, the far left wants to censor the far right. The center right won't defend us.
Look, I may be wrong here, so let me know in the comments if I'm missing some kind of context, but the moderate Republicans won't support the far-right Republicans because it's simply a numbers game, right? 60% of the U.S. population is white. 70% of the voter base that votes in America is white. But 20% of the Republican Party is non-white. And keep in mind, 40 to 45% of white people vote Democrat. So if you start talking about white nationalist rhetoric openly, a lot of these guys that you're targeting, hey, all these Indians, we're getting them out of here. All these black guys, we're getting them out of here. All these Mexicans, we're getting them out of here. The Republican base, the 20% that supports the Republican Party is going to jump ship. And all of a sudden, you're going to be screwed because the liberals are going to get all those votes. Because at the end of the day, no matter what you say, somebody's going to vote liberal if it comes down to staying in America and voting for your opposition that you disagree with, or voting for the Republican Party and getting deported because you elected a bunch of white nationalists that want to get rid of everybody, right? Without exception, who's not white. So it's a numbers game. And I think that if you look at it that way, you can understand why the moderate Republicans are a little bit hesitant about going out of their way to support the far right. But let me know if I'm wrong about that.
It was like this for years. The center right for a decade would say, we're against cancel culture, we're against censorship. They never got censored and they never got canceled. They remained gainfully employed and they had all of the platforms available to them. The people that were being canceled and censored were the Proud Boys, the alt-right, Red Ice, TRS, Richard Spencer, people like myself. Did Ben Shapiro, did the people at CPAC, did the Blaze, did any of them ever stick up for us? No. No, because they were in a handshake agreement with the far left. The far left wants the far right destroyed, and that means that you get this very moderate and weak and flaccid center right that isn't really a threat. The center right allows this because then they are protected on their right flank. Whereas someone like myself would challenge Charlie Kirk or Ben Shapiro and say, you're not right-wing enough, you're not pure enough, you're not giving the people what they want, whereas we would ordinarily be in competition on the college campus, on the social platform. Now we are taken out of the equation, and now there's no competition. Think about it. For many years, who did Ben Shapiro have to compete with? Nobody. Because everybody else was banned from Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube for the better part of the last decade. It was the institutional center-right establishment right-wingers that literally cut deals with Facebook. And they were the biggest ad providers. Daily Wire was the second biggest ad buyer on Facebook for like 5 years. They cut deals with Google. And the deal was that as long as they didn't say anything conspiratorial about the vaccine or the pandemic, they would keep their channels. Meanwhile, everybody else got cut down for one thing or another. Election denial, COVID conspiracy, anti-Semitism, white nationalism, whatever. So that was always, they were always in bed together. That's the irony. The center right will say that the far right is paid by the feds. The far right is controlled by the far left. Or they'll say something like the far left and far right are in a symbiotic relationship. They'll say that the far left funds right-wing extremism because right-wing extremism creates the impetus for far left action. In other words, if the far left funds the Ku Klux Klan and the Ku Klux Klan does a big visible public rally, then the far left is going to say, oh my gosh, the Klan is on the rise. We need to give the SPLC more money. And people say the same thing about the ADL. They say that people that criticize Israel are actually friends with the ADL because the more vocal and visible and sensational the anti-Semitism is, the greater the need and the greater the funding for the ADL. And so this is a claim by the center right that the far right and the far left are in a symbiotic, mutualistic relationship. The reality is the opposite. The center right is in a mutualistic relationship with the far left. And here is the case in point. For years, the far left was putting the screws in the far right with censorship, with doxing, Antifa, showing up and disrupting the rallies, using violence, calling down federal law enforcement on the far right. And the center right stood by and watched, and in many cases participated in this. It was not a few times that center right figures would pass along things that I had said or information about me to far left groups so that then they could sabotage me and basically do the dirty work of the center right.
Can I just say, what a disgusting, dirty, grimy game that politics is. A bunch of backstabbing and people playing the other side and a bunch of putting on a mask and trying to hide your true intentions. It's such a dirty, disgusting, grimy game.
And the reason that you know this is because the center right always uses the language of the far left. When the center right wants to cancel the far right, what do they say about us? They say, we're the real Nazis. We're the real Klan. We're the real white nationalists. We're really engaged in hate speech, and that's why we have to go. Sean Hannity said that on his program this week. Mark Levin said it this week. Both Hannity and Mark Levin said on their shows, Nick Fuentes needs to be censored. Sean Hannity said, I should not have a platform. Mark Levin said we should censor more hate speech. Well, who drives all of that? Who is driving hate speech legislation? Who's driving even, let's say, the monitoring of hate speech? Who's on that far right beat that's creating all of the hysteria about that? It's the far left. So on the contrary, and this is why I said we need to talk about me in particular, and then this conversation in general, there is this ongoing dialectical conversation about the far left, the far right, the center left, the center right, and how they're all interacting. And that is the narrative that people are uncritically consuming. I'm sure you've heard it before. People say that really anybody to the right of Tucker Carlson must be a federal operative. Anybody to the right of Sarah Palin, anybody to the right of Sean Hannity is a Fed, or is, like Tucker himself says, they're in a symbiotic relationship with the ADL. They're simply creating the crisis that the far left is there to address. But when you actually think about it deep down, it couldn't be further from the truth. It's actually the opposite. And that is the narrative that we saw over the past week, which is what exactly? All of the pro-Trump influencers, which, let's just say it, Trump is center-right. The Republican Party, the MAGA movement, the Trump movement is center-right. It just is. They're not immigration extremists. They're not isolationists. They're not even social conservatives. How many gay men are in the Trump administration? They support government funding of IVF. They gave up on abortion. They're not even social conservatives. They're saying about immigration, we only want to remove the criminals. We don't want a mass deportation anymore. They gave up on the border wall. We're in a war with Iran, which was cheered on by all the legacy press. So the institutional right, establishment right, center right, Republican Party, Trump, they are the center right. Everybody that is supporting the Trump movement is center right. And all those influencers are now saying, we have this SPLC indictment, and they're saying, well, Charlottesville was funded by the left. The far-right extremists were funded by the left. And they're licking their chops and they're saying, see, we told you so. Anything to the right of Trump, anything critical of Trump, in other words, anything right of the center, anything critical of the center is actually an operation. It's illegitimate. You can't trust it. Don't look at it. Don't go there.
All right, guys, we're going to stop the video here, but I think that Nick made a great point towards the end where he essentially said the moderate right is a part of the Democratic Party in the sense that the far left are the ones that are pushing the narrative about censorship and cancel culture and attacking those on the far right, whereas the moderate right does nothing to stop it. And if anything, they capitulate to the far left and their talking points and their rhetoric. So when you look at stuff like social media, which he mentioned earlier, you know, Facebook, Instagram, all these other social media platforms, they would cancel you if you spoke out against far left talking points, right? Especially during COVID and stuff like that. If you had a free thought when it came to COVID, you would be canceled. So you had to tread lightly as a result of that. Whereas the far left, they got to speak with zero consequences. They could say whatever they wanted. And so right now, the far left has more control over the narrative in the United States than the far right. So let me know what you guys think about what Nick said here. Let me know what you guys think about the video. Thanks for watching. I appreciate you guys, and I'll see you in the next one.